Hey everyone, this is Cam Garrity. Welcome back to This Should Have Been a Phone Call. Today on the show, we have Madeleine Bundy, an amazing actor and designer. She has appeared on screen in shows like Netflix's Russian Doll, but she's best known for theatrical productions in which she's collaborated with playwright Matt Cox. This includes the KAPOW-i GOGO Saga, based on 90s anime like Pokemon and Sailor Moon, as well as the smash hit Puffs, 7 increasingly eventful years at a certain school of magic and magic, based on, well, I'll let you guess what that's based on. I first saw Puffs when a filmed version of the production was screened in theaters, and I instantly fell in love. My sister and I had a chance to see it when we were in New York in 2018, and we were totally blown away by everyone's talent, the detail of the sets and costumes, and the amount of empathy and heart packed into the show. Madeleine, of course, had a huge part to play in all of that, and I'm so excited we had this chance to meet. She isn't magic, but she is the reason people believe in magic. This should have been a phone call with my spellbinder, Madeleine Bundy. I am such a huge fan of Puffs.
Thank you.
Thank you. It had been on my radar for a while, and then when the Fathom event happened, I was like, this is fantastic. I finally get a chance to see it. And then about a year later, my sister and I went to New York City, and we were able to get tickets to see it in person. And it was just such a wonderful experience. And I can't thank you enough for creating that.
Oh my gosh.
Creating that atmosphere.
Thank you for being supportive, because we did not think that we would do the show for as long as we were able to do it, but it was because, of really nice fans that honestly would come back and see it again, multiple times, that sent the message to, producers, people who have the power to raise money, that it was a valuable product. So it's because of people and the Puff fans they're just so kind. That was one of the things that we noticed very quickly, is that it seemed to be a magnet for just people with empathy, kind people that wanted to, watch something sort of, I kind of am now thinking of it as sort of the Paddington category of content, or
Totally.
a little bit, Ted Lasso's a little bit of that too, which is just it's just sending a positive message, which I think,
That's
especially
so right.
in the time that we have been in this country particularly, but in the world, I think people just are really craving that positive energy. So
Absolutely. No, and I would definitely recommend to anybody. It's available to buy in iTunes and some other places where you can stream things. I've been rewatching it this past week, and I had somehow forgotten just how much heart there was, because I was thinking of it, primarily as this really wonderful piece of comedy and innovative scenery and the way you guys all play different parts. But then as I'm watching it again,
thank you for describing the scenery though. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
So kind.
It was so lovely, and I definitely want to talk to you more about the creation process in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but before we do that, I wanted to ask too about KAPOW-i GOGO and whereabouts you are with that these days.
Yes, so I'm going to backtrack just a tiny bit. Cool. I went to NYU to study theater. I kind of had a very eclectic education. My program was a little bit of everything. So performance, voice and speech, singing, but I did a bunch of design. I was taking a lot of design classes, a little bit of directing, but kind of performance and design were sort of my main categories. And in the middle of that, I was very lucky to join this theater company down in Tribeca, that's where I met Matt. And I actually met majority of Puffs, of, everyone in the cast. And we were doing that. There was this really fun, I don't know how to, it was people don't like when we were doing this thing in this theater company called Serials. People don't really like it when it's described as sketch comedy, but there was some sketch comedy happening. They were like little plays, but a lot of them had sort of a light and airy tone that you maybe don't typically think of when you think of, New York plays. I was working with Matt on we did a bunch of these like short little plays down in this basement. And it was just like a fun thing that we were all doing as an acting company. It was a fun thing to do on the weekends. And like there would be like 5 little plays in a weekend, and then the audience would vote to see like which plays that they liked. And those plays would get to come back the following week. So it was sort of like this friendly competition, but it was really a way to just kind of like for the acting company to blow off steam, and also for writers to experiment and try new things. So I started working with Matt. Matt and I were actors in this company, and we were backstage once, and he was like, "Oh, I'm thinking about maybe writing one of these little plays. Do you think that would be a good idea?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely, and I would like help you with that." So he actually started writing a Game of Thrones parody. So that's how he started writing in the basement over in Tribeca, which was really fun. And then we did that for a while. It kept getting voted back, and then he had this idea for sort of a like parody of 90s animated cartoons, things like Pokemon, X-Men, the 90s animated series. And he was like,
Sailor Moon.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Dragon
and
Ball
so
Z.
he was like, "Oh, I think I want to make a love letter to the stuff that we loved as a kid." So he wrote the show called KAPOW-i GOGO, and I was playing the titular. And so, we did like, I want to say there were like 8 short little vignettes that we were doing in the serials. And then when that sort of wrapped up, it had like kind of natural wrap up at the end. We all the group kind of all looked at each other, and we were like, maybe we want to keep doing this, because it was really fun. It was like, it's so silly because they were just these short little plays, but it just felt so rewarding, and people had a really positive response to it. Matt was like, maybe I can take these little plays and we could turn them into a larger project. So then we transferred that to the pit. We staged this I think it was like a 5-hour production, and it was like this journey. So this little girl KAPOW-i is very, she's, I think of her as sort of like Ash from Pokemon, but also like a little bit Luke Skywalker, a little bit Ripley when she gets older. We're watching her journey through this very colorful, funny universe that feels very, nostalgic for, those things I described. I don't know. I think this group really believes in sort of that Pixar element of storytelling, which is, it's great that it's funny and you have all these lovely characters, but it's got to have a strong through line of heart. Yeah, so we did that, and we were working on KAPOW-i, and then Matt sort of came to the group with the idea for the puffs, which is, a love letter to the HP universe.
Sure. That's so great. And did I see on your website that you're still working on KAPOW-i?
After we were wrapping up Puffs, we were talking about, we wanted to do KAPOW-i again, because kind of, as much as we like Puffs, like we really feel like KAPOW-i is like our baby, and it's like, oh, we just want more people to know about it, because we just believe in it. So we believe in it so hard.
Sure.
So we were talking about remounting this production again, hopefully with more resources, because for people who aren't familiar with Puffs or KAPOW-i, it is a very DIY aesthetic. And that really comes from having very little resources. It's very difficult and very expensive to make theater in, anywhere, but especially New York City or, any expensive city. So we sort of were like, let's embrace the sort of like lack of budget and really and say yes and to that, and go like, we're not going to apologize for not having a budget. We're going to make it very clear to you that we don't have a budget. And that's sort of connected to my love. We can go into further about that, but that's sort of connected to my love of props. But yeah, no, so we were talking about remounting KAPOW-i, but unfortunately, the pandemic occurred.
Right.
So we did do a couple episodes over Zoom, which anyone can go to our YouTube channel. That's called the Ultra Corporation. We did film a couple episodes, but no, we want to remount it. We just don't know what format would be best at the moment, just because making theater right now is very difficult.
What was the first album you remember buying?
Oh my gosh. Wait, that I received? The first album that I received?
The first album that you It could be that if that holds a larger place in your heart and mind, or I'm thinking too of just like the first one that you remember either buying yourself or asking to have purchased for you.
It's so funny. I was actually thinking about this today just because like I was thinking about how like everything is digital now in terms of the media that we consume. And it's like, it's so hard to buy gifts for people because I'm like, I feel like a default option used to be like, oh, I can get this thing on DVD for this person. I can get this thing on a CD, and like, but no one wants that anymore. It's just like getting gifts we live in this age where we all have so much stuff, but getting gifts for people is so, it's hard. It's getting harder and harder. Getting CDs as a gift just felt so special when I was a kid. And I think it's because I've an older sister and 3 older brothers, and they just had massive, massive CD collections. And I always just felt like, I don't know why, I was like, my CD collection was always so tiny. And so as a kid, I was like, when I got a CD, it was like, yes, my collection is is growing. I loved the 90s pop music that everyone loved. You know, I'm a big fan of pop culture and being into the pop culture. So I was I loved the Britney Spears albums and Christina Aguilera and NSYNC and Backstreet Boys. But I also like, I collected a lot of Broadway albums. That's always what I asked for like birthdays or Christmases. There was always like 6 musicals. I'm trying to think of one in particular. Honestly, it's a little bit of a guilty pleasure, I guess, but my favorite musical is The Music Man. I just I know it's I feel like it's one of those musicals that I would almost put it in the Cats category for people. There's people that are like, or Oklahoma, it's like they really don't like it, or they're like, no, that's my favorite thing. I love the classic standards. You know, anything that a high school would do, I'm kind of a sucker for. So I loved my Music Man album. I would listen to Broadway records over and over and over again and memorize the lyrics. I was a big musical theater fan.
Well, and coming up in the 90s too, you also had the Disney Renaissance and what they were doing with basically Broadway on screen.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I loved it. I didn't know at this. So I'm actually, I don't know if you know this, I'm from Anchorage, Alaska.
Oh, okay.
It tends to be an icebreaker for conversations if I say I'm from Alaska, because then people have all these questions.
Yeah, of course they
do.
But
I think just being kind of like up there, tucked in the corner of the of the country, I didn't know that there were other people out there that shared as much passion for this stuff as I did. So then, moving to New York and going to NYU and discovering like, oh my gosh, there's like thousands and thousands of people that love the stuff that I do. I had no idea. I'm this one weirdo who's listening to all of these Broadway records.
Totally. No, and I grew up a huge fan of the Muppets and Sesame Street.
I'm a huge anything Henson related. I'm a huge fan of. Yes, absolutely.
And how they made all that stuff. And I remember having a similar feeling of like, none of my peers, none of my classmates had any kind of like, they kind of just thought like, well, why are you still holding on to this like kids media?
I felt there was definitely some shame, and this is definitely before all the MCU stuff and all the fandom and everyone embracing nerd culture as being sort of our main form of entertainment. I really was definitely one of the kids that felt like, oh, all the stuff I watch and listen to and take in is considered shameful. I was also a big Star Trek fan as a kid. I love TNG. I felt really embarrassed to talk about that in school. I didn't know anyone else who was watching that. Also TNG, they talk about like some DIY props. There's some stuff in there. They're, similar to, the first Star Wars movie where people are going like, oh, we need this thing. Okay, we're going to take all this stuff and glue it together. Okay, great. There's your prop for the week. So I also like that. I like finding that stuff too when I watch the episodes. Yeah.
Totally. Do you have a memorable story behind a scar that you've ever gotten?
Like a physical scar?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I'm going to knock on wood. I'm a lucky person and I've never broken a bone. A scar. Oh, nice. I'm not pausing because I'm genuinely just trying to think of an injury. I mean, honestly, I always have a hot glue gun in my hand. So I've definitely gotten some serious burns and singes by doing stupid things with that. I'm just genuinely trying to think of a major injury. I guess I've been very lucky.
Sure. No, that's totally fine. And this is what I'm talking about, that sometimes they just don't go anywhere. So that's totally, totally fair. No sled dogging accidents up in Alaska
No,
or
I've never
anything.
been on, you know, it's so funny. I feel like the Iditarod, I don't know why I've been talking about it so much recently. It's just been randomly coming up in conversation. I didn't know that people didn't know what the Iditarod was. So I
Oh,
think
okay.
literally the past couple of weeks, I've used that word casually, and people are like, "What are you saying? What are you talking about?" And I was like, "The Iditarod. What is that?" It's a dog sled race. Why are you saying that? Like we know what that is. No,
Yeah.
it's a fascinating activity where people race with a team of dogs from technically Wasilla, but I believe there's a start in Wasilla, which is a city, a small town not too far away from Anchorage. Then they start up again in Anchorage, and then they race all the way up to Nome. But if you're a professional dog sledder, you have a lot of dogs. Like you have to take care of a lot of animals. So I find it fascinating activity.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
No, and then like, yeah, I've never, you know what? I've never actually thought of the implications of like having to keep all those dogs somewhere
Well, I
when you're
it's because
not racing.
you need a license. We only ever had four animals growing up in the house
Hmm.
because I think after four animals you need a license, and I believe that's because there are dog sledders who have to have 20, 30 dogs. So it's to protect the animals. Fascinating. I recommend anybody look into spend 5 minutes doing a rabbit hole deep dive on the internet because it's a fascinating activity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I'll have to do a little more of that. Is there a fictional character that you find yourself most empathizing with?
Yes, I love Roger Rabbit.
Oh,
Roger Rabbit
nice.
is my favorite movie. I love Roger Rabbit. I feel like his energy is I don't know if I feel like I have a little bit of a split personality. Sometimes I can be a very like mopey Eeyore sadness from Inside Out kind of person. And then sometimes I am very ridiculous, off the wall. I think it's also, I'm a big voiceover fan. I've done a little bit of voiceover here in the city. I always feel like oh, those are the type of characters that I really that I do well when I'm in like that frame of mind. And it's just the movie is incredible.
Oh my gosh.
It's amazing it got
Absolutely.
made, and it's amazing it's as good as it is. It shouldn't be that good, but it's incredible because every single person in it is like putting their all, not just the Bob Hoskins and the act, but all the effects. If you want to do a Roger Rabbit deep dive, all those practical effects that they were able to do, and all those little, like animatronics they made to imitate Roger's movements. If you can find the actors working with those robots, those scenes are really fun to watch without the animation over it because it's just an incredible amount of intricate work went into that.
Totally. Yeah. And to see they even had like puppeteers trying to interact with Bob Hoskins to
It's
create the different
it's
movements. And
amazing, and it's not easy. It's really difficult, and you have to do take after take after take to get it right. But I mean, everyone wanted it to look amazing, and it does.
it does. Yeah. Do you think that movie influenced at all your interest in mixing media and creating these different juxtapositions? Because I mean, that's so much what that movie
Oh
is.
yeah, I mean, like I was a kid, I had a professor at NYU who did it. I don't know if she meant it in a positive way or a negative way. I think it's a positive thing. She sort of accused me of being a little bit all over the place in terms of my interests. I just love different mediums and I love trying different things. And I think I like the challenge of like, learning new skills and taking on new things. So, I love to perform, but I've always loved making things with my hands. I think I've been making things since I was a kid. Out of trash or random things in the house. I'm still doing that. I'm still making props and puppet items out of, garbage. And yeah, I love sculpture. I love just, different textures. And it was it influential. I think everything, especially from your childhood, it all kind of like goes into the pot, right?
Yeah.
So you might be influenced by things you're not even consciously aware of. I think I'm definitely influenced by that idea that that first Star Wars movie they were very unsure about it. They had a lower budget. They were pulling things out of the trash. They were recycling things from other shows. There were designers that were called up in panic, and people were going like, hey, we're out of stuff for the cantina scene. Can you bring whatever you have? And that's why there's the random, devil mask and werewolf mask in that scene, because it was just like, they were just literally throwing,
there was no money left.
There was no money left. They had to cover up actors. And I think that's definitely, some people might see that as a negative by like, oh, you did, oh, it looks that way because there isn't a budget. But I see it as a positive. I see it as people sort of being resilient when they're facing the odds of art making. Art making is incredibly difficult, and I think it requires a positive attitude. When I see, people throwing random stuff at the screen, I think it's like people sort of powering through the obstacles because they're trying to put something out there. Oh, and also you mentioned loving the Muppets and Henson stuff. That was, a lot of that early stuff was people cutting up jackets and rugs and, getting out the hot glue gun and making puppets out of what was nothing and turning it into something. It's definitely influential.
Yeah, and figuring out how all those materials work.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they figure things out and they get a little bit of budget and they go, okay, we need things to function this way and that. And then, then you're able to get the materials you really need. But it all starts from a DIY attitude and a positive attitude. It's all influential. Absolutely.
Is there a misunderstanding from your childhood about life and just how the world works that you could kind of only look back and laugh at? I've always been sort of obsessed with art and performing, and I always had this very strong, I didn't always know what I literally wanted to do as an adult, but I always knew that I was like, I'm going to go to New York and I want to make things. And I think that when you're a kid, even when you're like a teenager, you have a very kind of doughy-eyed feeling about what all of that stuff is going to be, because you haven't experienced anything. You don't have enough information. But, I was definitely someone that was like, I was reading books about the entertainment industry and reading books about what my favorite artists had experienced. And so you do read about the obstacles, but I think there's a little part of you that goes, I'm not going to have to experience any of that. It's going to be smooth sailing for Madeleine. I'm like, as long as I work hard and as long as I'm kind and well-intentioned, everything's going to be great. And that's just not the reality. That's just like really not. You can be that, you can have the best of intentions and work really hard. There are still a lot of obstacles as an artist, and in whatever industry you're in, whether that's theater or writing or, movie making, TV making, you are going to run into a lot of obstacles, and it can be really exhausting. It can really wear you down. So I guess I kind of look back and go like, oh, if I had only known all that information, would I be an artist? I don't know. I don't know. It's too late now. It's all I know how to do. For sure. No, and it reminds me of, there's a quote, I can't remember who it's attributed to. It was something along the lines of, it was specifically talking about a teacher who kind of said like, I'm at the end of my career now, I'm looking back, and if I think of when I was first starting out and all the things I've done between then and now, I don't think I could have said yes to everything that I did, but you take it kind of one step at a time, and each successive yes brings you higher and higher up. And it's kind of a similar thing, I think, to artists of like, okay, I'm gonna take an art class. Yes. Okay, maybe now I move to New York. Yes. And before you know it, you're where you are now.
It's such a funny thing, no matter what kind of artist you are, whether you're an actor, you're making props or costumes, whatever it is, you can't predict what's gonna happen, because you're not sitting at a desk, knowing like these are exactly like, you have a list of sort of your responsibilities. It's so weird about being an actor. You are asking permission constantly. Yeah. Can I go into that room? Can you say yes to my creativity? You can do everything right. You can be the good student. You can do everything you're supposed to do. A lot of people are going to say no. They're going to say, no, you can't come into this room and you can't do that. What I have found to be more fulfilling in general, not that there's anything wrong with auditioning, and I have 2 auditions this week. I have to tape and turn in. But what I think is really fulfilling is saying yes to yourself as much as possible. Yeah. Say yes to yourself as much as possible. And again, I'm trying to go back, I think it's part of, positivity. Say yes to yourself. And that's why I think one of the best things you can do is turn to your friends who also have talents and go like, hey, what do you want to make? because no one's going to work harder or make a project better than people at its core who are really invested in it and it's really important to them. So I feel like there's generally like those two paths as an artist: say yes to yourself, or you're asking to be invited into the room. There's nothing wrong with either one, and hopefully you get a little bit of both. But this life you've chosen, the path that you're taking as an artist, you can't predict it. It's funny. A lot of people think it's like this upward climb.
Oh, sure.
And it's not. It's not. It's
No.
not upward.
Nothing's linear about it.
I think of it as more like you're kind of always going around in a circle. Like, oh, I got this really cool project and I'm working a lot. Okay, nothing's happened for a while. Like, oh, okay, something else. It's kind of, it's going up and down all the time. There are people that work consistently for 10, 20 years, and then all of a sudden, whoop, nothing. And they have to reinvent themselves and figure out what they're doing, or maybe they have to transition to directing, something like that. Everyone's different. So there's no one sort of clear template that you can use to guide. You kind of have to figure it out. It's exciting and frustrating. It's both things.
You already talked a little bit about teaming up with Matt and how you guys first kind of started working together, but what does your development process look like? Are you writing and designing at the same time? Are you coming to him with ideas for sketches and then he goes off and writes? Or
it's
what's
like,
that collaboration?
So I do kind of, if I had to like simplify it, I do think it's a little bit of a back and forth. There have been things that he has definitely put in the script that he said he's wanted. For example, the Ron mop in Puffs, that was always, I think he said, like, I don't know what all this stuff looks like, but I know that I want Ron to be played by a mop. And as a designer, seeing that in a script or hearing that from a playwright is a gift, because when you have that one little detail, you can then go like, okay, this is sort of like the seed for everything else. I do believe, we started talking about this show back in, I think, 2016. So this was a while ago. So I don't remember the very first conversations word for word, but I believe the design conversation started with the mop being in the script. And then you can sort of go, okay, cool. Well, if Ron is a mop, then how do we distill all of these other things that we're so familiar with from this universe down to this one object? And some things were very, like, those conversations were very quick, like Hermione's a wig. Great. So, it's like, okay, we have this much for a budget. Great. I'm going to Home Depot and she's made out of these materials. And then, some things were much harder. Like it took us a long time to figure out what the snake house, how they would be represented on stage. And that took multiple drafts. And sometimes choices were made out of panic, because it's like, oh, we don't have not only do we not have a lot of money, we don't have the manpower to build a lot of stuff. There was a lot of stuff that I had to build by myself very quickly. So I could only, I'm a human being. I could only do so much at once. And then just time, like when we were at the pit and then we transferred to the Elector and New World Stages, with each iteration of the show, we just only had so much time. So we sort of were trying to take advantage of every time we transitioned to a new theater, we were sort of trying to take advantage of that and go, okay, great. What worked, we'll keep that. What didn't work, let's redo that. But honestly, since serials, when I started building props for Matt's shows, I think it has been a back and forth. Like, again, like sometimes like something's in the script and then sometimes he's like, oh, I don't know what this is. And then maybe I fill it in. Maybe an actor will have a suggestion. There were definitely some items that were like not intended to be in his scripts at all. And I'll go like, oh, I have this idea. Are you okay with that? Great. Okay, let's see if it works. Oh, it got a laugh. Great. We'll keep that. Oh, it didn't get a laugh. We will cut that. That kind of thing. Yeah, like definitely like a back and forth. And, Matt would change things in rehearsals to lines and details. And if, something wasn't working or if an actor had an idea, something would get shifted around. Working with him has always been a big Rubik's Cube, I think. In a positive way.
Sure,
it's fun.
Sure. No, and so to me, like the aesthetic of Puffs so wonderfully matches with the tone of the show. Mm-hmm. You could really tell that there was a unison there. Would you say that the style of Puffs is pretty indicative of your personal artistic aesthetic?
It's so funny because I think that when I I would say yes, and I'm going to say yes and no.
Sure.
The yes part is again, going back to what I said, is like, I do have a deep love for sort of the positive, like DIY, take anything that's in your home and glue it together or tape it together and make it work for that object, even if you don't have the budget. I think there's something really lovely to that. And it definitely fits with the sort of dramaturgy of Puffs. You know, these kids are living in the basement of this castle. I think they've gotten more love in the fandom recently, but I feel like there was sort of, when HP was sort of getting really popular, they were sort of like the house that like everyone was kind of pushing off to the side, making fun
Right.
of a little bit. And I think we really love this idea that all these kids were sort of getting the scraps of the castle, all this stuff that had sort of landed in the basement. So that was sort of like our dramaturgical justification for like not having a budget and using very humble materials like burlap, felt. The golden egg that Cedric gets is, made of spoons. Hermione being made out of, a $12 spool of rope from Home Depot. All the Rons were, $2 off the street here in Queens, where I live. I think that fits, and I have a deep love for it. And I have a deep love for, sort of illustration. I love children's books. It's actually like, it's a dream of mine to write a children's book. So when you have a deep love for sort of that aesthetic too, you can always take out a piece of cardboard and paint whatever you want to paint and just cut it out. And,
right.
That doesn't require much of a budget at all. I don't like to toot my own horn that much. I like to stay really humble. I think I do have a very strong sort of deep imaginative life inside of me. I love going to the museums. I love the Met or the MoMA. And so when the Puffs images in my head, I think are much more expensive looking. And then you're sort of, there's a thing Terry Gilliam talks about, because he's always struggled with having sort of a very like big imagination, but getting very small budgets for his movies. But he talks about a thing that I really believe in, which is picture your $1 million production. Picture, even if that's not your budget, picture your $1 million production, and then try to get as close to there as possible. And through that struggle, you are going to force yourself to make creative decisions that you wouldn't have otherwise made had you been given that money. Sometimes money doesn't help the creative process. Sometimes it actually allows us to make sort of lazy, easy decisions. And sometimes actually the harder decisions, the more difficult choices actually make for better art. Sometimes, it depends. I mean, but if someone wanted to come along and give me a bigger budget for Puffs, I would absolutely utilize it. I would love to do that.
They don't have to lose your number.
Yeah.
No, and it's funny. It makes me think of Terry Gilliam working on Labyrinth as well with Jim Henson.
Yeah.
And they've talked about that, of course, was its own multi-million-dollar production with the animatronics and all these different things. But they still inhabited that world at times, both for Labyrinth and the Dark Crystal, with like little wind-up toys that they got at a dime store, just to have them like shooting through. And it's like, okay, so there's room for both. Which, what you just said there really reminded me of.
There's absolutely room for both. A DIY type of aesthetic doesn't mean there can't be polish. If you put love into something, you can make it look really, really good. And some people won't, they won't have any clue. Yeah, it's a total. There isn't one answer. Sometimes a budget helps, and sometimes it's a hindrance, I think.
Sure. Yeah, because even if you do get that $1 million production of Puffs up on Broadway, Ron's still going to be a mop.
Still going to be a mop.
Might be a $5 one instead of a $2 one, but
I mean, I think about this a lot just because it's something I've had to think about a lot. But like the kind of space that you're in, especially in theater, changes stuff a lot. You can't always just take a production and plop it into a bigger theater and use all the same stuff. You have to. I think it's really important to reevaluate the room that you're in. There are shows. I don't want to name anything specific because I don't want to be negative, but there are shows that, in New York, I've seen, they're in a smaller space and then they transfer to Broadway and they try to just do the same thing and it doesn't work because that show was built for that more intimate space. And it really needed to have been like, it's not that it couldn't have worked in that larger space. It just needed to really be reevaluated in terms of the purpose of all the items that are going in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I even think of like Avenue Q, which started on Broadway
Mm-hmm.
and ended up with you guys at New World
Oh,
Stages.
yes.
And I think it works better in a smaller theater, personally, just because of the scale, and it's a humble show also.
It's funny how that operates. Some things work in very intimate spaces, and then some things need to be operatic, and then some things transfer well to film and some things don't. There's sort of a mystery to some of that I'm not sure we can understand totally
Yeah.
understand. It's kind of part of the magic.
Right. Totally understand if you would rather not get into this, but
For sure.
how has your relationship to Harry Potter changed over your life? You know, first growing up with it as presumably a fan, then during Puffs when you're now like truly a part of the fandom in a way, and then potentially, you know, after Ms. Rowling's
She Who Shall Not Be Named.
Exactly.
I think that's a really important. I'm so glad you asked it, because I think it's a really important question, and it's part of this larger conversation we all have to have about if you are someone that loves an object that someone makes, but you do not believe in what that person says, you don't believe in their actions or what they're doing because if they're hurting people, how do you then deal with that object they created is a really fascinating art question, both on I think an intellectual level and a moral level. It's so funny, like I was a 90s kid, so of course I remember when it was like it became a big deal, and I went through a little phase where like I was reading them. I think I sort of like grew out of it a little bit as I think I got a little impatient waiting for those last few books to come out, and I sort of read them out of obligation, but probably became less passionate about it later. It's so funny, I didn't go to theme parks really at all until I was an adult. So I was not, the wizarding world was not on my radar. That wasn't something I was like passionate to, that wasn't on my list of things to buy a ticket to and attend. Although I have been since. I did go for research for Puffs, and the set designs they put into that park are really incredible. I wasn't aware of her controversy when we started building Puffs. So, that wasn't on my radar yet. So, redoing all the research for Puffs was, it was a treat. It was like, oh gosh, I get to read all these wizarding books for research. And I get to, and going back and reading them and reevaluating them as an adult, but also as an adult who's going to be pushing it through this different filter, definitely was looking at everything in a totally different way, which was really fun and fascinating. And I'm so glad Puffs is there for people. It's part of this fandom, and it's there for people, and they can know that the people behind it are in full support of the trans community, and trans women are women. Absolutely. 100%. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. The question, when she started spouting stuff online, it was really heartbreaking. You start to reevaluate your relationship to this object you created. But, we have gotten messages from fans saying like, thank you, I can enjoy this corner of this fandom. And I can feel good about that. I mean, it's horrible, the stuff she's putting online. That's my opinion. It's horrible, the stuff she's putting online.
Right. Yeah, I think the Harry Potter and the Sacred Text folks, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that podcast, but went through a similar kind of evaluation.
I know that every sort of Potter thing that I was aware of, I know, put out a statement, and we're sort of grappling with the question. I mean, yeah, it's heartbreaking. We don't know this person, but we have, with famous people in general, you sort of have this cartoon image in your head of what they're like, and you hope that they're good people. And I have no idea who she is in terms of, interacting with her on a casual level. I just, putting out all this information out online, her sort of manifesto, it's harmful to people, and I don't think it's okay. I don't think you should put anything out there that's going to hurt people. I think that's a good rule to live by.
Yeah. It reminds me of what you were saying before about reading people's journey to success in different books and biographies. And in the same way, you don't know how bumpy that road was to get to success. There's never going to be a way for us to really know what was in the heart of any of those heroes who we looked up to.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a strange thing about celebrity and our relationship with the author as we fall in love with their art.
I mean, yeah, so, I mean, I don't know how, I don't exactly, I don't know how to say it better than you did, but if anyone out there is, if they're a fan of the HP stuff, but they're grappling with sort of their relationship to it, I hope you can, just find maybe join the Puffs team.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we don't want anyone to get hurt, and we don't want anyone to feel like they can't be who they are in this world. Because frankly, it's no one else's business who you want to be and how you want to identify. I just think that's a positive way to live your life. It makes sense to me. Mind your own business.
Yeah. What do you find that, like, a strong art direction, what does that visual communication do as almost subtext to a show, as it feeds both the audience and the actors who are on stage bringing the show to life?
So I think design in general is an incredibly powerful tool. I think that's why I've gravitated towards it. I personally, I'm actually going to go back. I'm going to go back to talking about Roger Rabbit, because why not? Because
Great.
I love it. No, there's this really lovely. I mean, you might have seen it. There's this really lovely video that was going around on the internet a few years ago. It's called "Bumping the Lamp," which I think if your listeners want to find that, there's this.
Yeah, I'll include it in the
It's
show
this really
notes.
lovely video of someone explaining this idea of what it means as an artist to bump the lamp. So when Eddie and Roger are handcuffed together and they go into the back of the bar, and Eddie's like, he's trying to figure out how to get free from the handcuffs, and he grabs a saw, he sort of whips Roger around the room, and Roger bumps his head on a lamp on the ceiling, and the lamp starts swinging like back and forth. And now all of a sudden you see Roger's shadow bouncing all over the walls. And if you pause the frame, you can actually see that the animators have animated light going through Roger's ears as the lamp passes behind him to indicate that his ears are translucent. And so the video is sort of explaining about, they didn't have to do that. The animators did not have to put that level of detail. There have been other movies that have mixed live action and animation that have not put that level of detail into it. Or another example he says is, actors are always meeting eye line with Roger. Even if the actor wasn't quite in the position he needed to be in for the shot, they figure out how to animate the character around that. So they'll have, Roger stretch up or like sink down. So it always looks like they're communicating. So that was another example he uses. And he's just really trying to demonstrate that there's a level of detail that artists can decide to put into their work. And I obsessively believe in that. Sometimes maybe to an unhealthy degree. I always think you should put that little bit extra in because someone might notice. But even if people don't consciously notice, I think it sends a message, maybe unconsciously, to an audience of like, oh my gosh, like I'm in the presence of a project that has been taken care of. When you're in an audience and you feel like I don't have to worry about the production in front of me, they've taken care of me, they've really thought about everything, then that person can sit back and enjoy it and laugh and sort of take it in on an emotional or intellectual or whatever they need that day, whatever reason they came to live theater to embrace. And I think that sends a message to actors too. I think when actors feel like the design team is on top of it and they care, they're in the presence of people that really care and are trying to make the best project. You as an actor, you're going to put your work in because you're going, oh, everyone really is trying to bring their A game. Because you work on projects, especially when you're taking the path of getting invited into the room, you work on projects where like, wow, no one in this room seems to care about the quality of this.
Right.
And then it's probably going to show. So honestly, I just think like that extra level of detail, caring, asking yourself, is this the best choice? I think one of the greatest assets an artist can have sometimes is to admit like, hey, I made this choice and I don't think it's working. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to think about this again and I'm going to change it. A lot of people don't want to admit that they did anything wrong because they think of wrong as like something bad. But I don't think it's something bad. I think looking at something and reevaluating it and going like, oh, I think I can make this better is actually your brain learning. And there's nothing
Yes.
wrong. There's nothing wrong with sort of gaining a new perspective on whatever it is, a moment, a scene, an entire object, a sequence, whatever it is.
And most of the time, you wouldn't have gotten to that solution if you didn't make the mistake.
Absolutely. And the more you realize, okay, I can fix that, I can fix that, I can fix that. You're gonna the next project you're gonna do. Hopefully, you're gonna get to those final solutions faster, maybe. Although I think that depends on the project. But you're just You're just design decisions. You're just exercising a muscle and developing taste. And I think putting that extra level of work in, it just, whether it's conscious or unconscious, sends a message to the person that's purchased the ticket that you're not taking that purchase they made for granted. You want to give them a good, you want to give them a good product, and you want them to feel good when they go home that night.
I love that. What about your life right now do you think your past self would be most proud of?
Oh, especially during the quarantine period, and I know we're still kind of in a quarantine period. It's a little fuzzy. I don't quite know what the rules are. Growing up, I really did not know anything about mental health, and I did not think about mental health a lot. It just wasn't on my radar. And when I moved to New York, and I think one of the benefits of going to acting class, if anyone's listening out there and they're thinking of going to acting class, I think the best thing you can learn is empathy. And when you start to learn about empathy, you start to think about not only caring for others, you start to think more about caring for yourself and your mental health. And then just doing puffs and, the message of, I do think puffs made me a better person, actually. Just the message of like, be kind to others, be patient with people, people can change, that kind of message. I think that made me a better person. And then just going through the quarantine period and having this time to really reflect and think about myself, I feel like I'm taking mental health and my mental health more seriously than I ever did. And sort of reevaluating like, well, what actually makes me happy? What actually does taking care of yourself mean when we come out of this COVID time? Because I have faith that we will come out of it. What are the things that I was doing that was not beneficial to my life that I don't want to go back to? And what things can I do to make my future more positive? Honestly, like I don't know if I'd be thinking that way if we had not gone through this quarantine period, just because I spent so much a ridiculous concentrated amount of time thinking with myself because we were all we were all in our home stuck.
You had no choice but to do that.
It was just so much time thinking about, I hope not in a narcissistic way. I hope I sort of trying to think about myself in in a therapeutic kind of way. How can I take care of myself better coming out of this, and others? That's part of it.
What is something that people think is easy about what you do, either acting or designing, that's actually quite challenging?
Oh, I mean, like we were talking about this a little bit, with your podcast, because you were telling me that you edit the podcast, and there is a level of tedium to all of this stuff that I don't think a lot of people realize. Both as an actor and as a designer, I'll be selfish and plug a couple of things that I'm working on.
Please.
There is a really wonderful YouTuber named Patrick Willems. If anyone wants to go check him out, he does film theory essays. He's very funny, a very kind person. He saw Puffs, and he's working on a full-length movie that should be coming out probably in the next 6 weeks, I think. He has a platform called Nebula. You can find that movie there. There's a puppet sequence in the movie that I have made all the props for. We're actually filming that this Saturday. But, the props list for this sequence, wasn't crazy. Sometimes the props list that I get for shows are, I mean, my gosh, like there's 400 items in Puffs. I think there's maybe just as many in KAPOW-i. And most of the projects that I have done in New York are when people had very low budgets and they do kind of need to get the biggest bang for their buck. And so people know me as someone like, I will go above and beyond. I will do that extra 10% that we were talking about. And I can do it all with cardboard and paint. So I think a lot of people think that, but I think a lot of people think that like, oh, it's just gluing some stuff together and throwing some paint on it. It's very easy. It is not easy. It is very, very tedious. Even when you love it, even when you're having fun, there's a lot of these items that there's a lot of steps involved. And similar to an actor, there's sort of a cliche conversation that you'll hear a lot of actor friends talk about, which is, someone, maybe a friend or a family member will be like, oh, the acting thing, have you ever thought about being on Saturday Night Live? And they sort of say it like you've never thought of it before. You've never heard of it.
Saturday Night what?
What? I am an actor. I should go be on Saturday Night Live. And it's far more complicated than that. There's so many more steps involved. There's so much more randomness that has to happen in people's lives to get into that step to even get to audition. Or, another one is like, have you ever thought about being in a commercial? It's sort of a cliche suggestion people have. And I don't think people mean any, ill will with it. It's just like a funny,
No.
it's just like a funny thing that a lot of actors hear as if they never heard of it. But actually the little life's just so much more complicated.
Totally. Hey, have you ever thought of being in Russian Doll?
Oh, yes. I actually have thought of being in Russian Doll, and I am in Russian Doll. Fun fact, I am in Russian Doll.
Awesome. What do you want your future in theater to look like?
That is also an interesting question because I'm in the middle of moving out of New York City. I am moving to Los Angeles.
Oh, great.
I'm moving in about 4 weeks. I have a lot of packing to do. I'm already exhausted.
Sure.
So I don't know the answer to that question right now because I'm not quitting theater because I think that's a silly thing to say, but the theater community atmosphere is very different in Los Angeles than it is in New York. So I don't know what my relationship to that will be there. But, in general, I really hope, and this is not to sound negative, I think this is just like it's kind of where we are in this moment. Theater is very difficult right now in the city with
Right.
COVID and everything. It's, even Broadway they're struggling to get the rehearsals they need and to get the people in the seats to keep the show open. But the city is full of people that want to make things, and it will always be full of people that want to make things. And I think it will survive this. I just don't know what that'll look like. So my future in theater, I hope everything in New York is thriving again sooner rather than later, because this industry is difficult enough. It doesn't need this extra layer of stress and difficulty. But yeah, no, I don't know what my relationship will be, but that's very exciting to me because I'm sort of taking this as an opportunity to see what else I can do and see what
Sure.
else where I could take my skills in a positive way because I'm interested in different things.
Is the hope to pursue some acting, more
I
formal
mean, like
acting career, or?
I mean, I audition regularly, so
Mhm.
so yes, but honestly, like I have been doing some more writing. I really want to improve some of my illustration skills. So I'm mostly moving to Los Angeles for my mental health. I really want to be in that type of weather
I was gonna
at
say
the moment. And
where there's a sun.
I'm really looking forward to the weather and sort of, the food culture there is something I'm passionate about. That's exciting to me. And I've been auditioning a lot more for like TV and film. And so it just kind of made sense at the moment to sort of, rather than sit here in New York and kind of not know where everything is or what my future holds, to kind of, let's go on an adventure and explore some different mediums and do some different things. And I will also play, because I'm in the middle of moving, I haven't launched it yet, but I am going to be starting an online store called Madcat XO. So you'll be able to find that at madcatxo.com, and sort of trying to take some of my kind of weird, I was talking about this a little bit where I was like, I was struggling because I've been struggling finding like gifts for my family members that I feel are of like high quality. So
Yeah.
I wanted to create a store where people could find artistic, whimsical gifts, like really good quality gifts that they could give people that are fun, nothing sort of directly connected to fandoms, but things that people would like if you are a fan of things I think people will like if you are a fan of sort of nerd culture.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a project that I'm working on.
So how can people learn more about you and all the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like I said, I'm going to launch this website, madcatxo.com, and you can follow the social media links if you'd like to do that. But honestly, like at the moment, my Instagram, Madeleine Bundy, is a great way to follow me to see what I'm working on. Twitter, although I don't use Twitter that much, thank goodness. But but yeah, those are kind of, and I have a website too, madelinebundy.com.
Awesome.
Those are kind of, that's me at the moment.
That's it.
Until I get settled in Los Angeles and can have a more robust social media life. Yeah.
Great. Well, Madeleine, one last thing.
Okay.
You have opened new windows of my imagination to what can be done with visual storytelling.
That is so nice. That is such a nice thing for you to say. I am so honored.
Absolutely. And two more addendums to that. I think your sense of humor and commitment to the arts has made countless Patronus memories for people.
Oh,
and
wow.
Please continue to keep us under your spell.
Oh, that's really nice. I'm gonna cry. That's so nice. No, I really appreciate that because I like this show was, as a gift as it was not easy to make. You know, there were a lot of obstacles, and to hear that it was worth it and that it worked and that people like it is really nice to hear. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
We did it. You came to the end of another episode of This Should Have Been a Phone Call. So much thanks to Madeleine for taking the time for us to talk and to get to know her. If this is your first time listening, there are plenty of other episodes of the show. Just go to phonecallpod.com and you can listen to all of them right now. Please give us a follow at phonecallpod wherever you get your social media. And if you're feeling brave, I always appreciate a good review or comment over at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps the show grow, but it also revs your DeLorean to 88 miles an hour. So I definitely appreciate that. We'll see you next time on This Should Have Been a Phone Call. Oh, and one more thing. I love you. You're enough. Keep going.